Okay, so, we're all drowning in distractions these days, right? Like, how do you actually focus on getting work done?
It's a real struggle.
It is. So we're doing a deep dive into Cal Newport's book, Deep Work, today.
Ah, interesting
It
choice.
seemed very timely, and it's packed with strategies and examples.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? Newport actually argues that the ability to really focus is becoming more valuable than ever.
Which seems counterintuitive because, like you said,
Everything's designed to distract us.
exactly. It's like the more we need to focus, the harder it is to actually do it.
Right. It's like open offices, the constant emails, social media.
It's like a distraction obstacle course.
It really is. But what I find really fascinating is that Newport goes beyond just saying deep work makes you productive.
Oh, there's more to it.
He actually connects it to finding meaning and satisfaction in your work life,
Oh, that's interesting.
which is something I think we all crave, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So he defines deep work as the ability to focus without distraction on a cognitively demanding task.
Okay, that makes sense.
And he emphasizes that this isn't some newfangled idea either.
Right.
Historical figures like Carl Jung
Oh, wow.
were onto this way before constant notifications and everything.
Yeah, Jung built an entire tower just to escape distractions and focus on his writing.
He did.
Talk about commitment. But I'm guessing we don't all have to build towers to reap the benefits of deep work.
Definitely not. The book also talks about Jason Ben, a financial consultant, and he decided to make a radical career change and become a software developer.
Oh, wow. Okay, so how does deep work fit into that?
Well, Ben knew that he needed serious focus to master coding, so he went all in, locked himself in a room, no computer, for 2 months. Just textbooks and note cards.
Wait, no computer for 2 months? That's hardcore.
That is hardcore, and it's actually a perfect example of what Newport calls the principle of least resistance.
Okay, I like that. The principle of least resistance.
Yeah, and it basically says that without clear goals and feedback, we humans, we tend to choose the easiest, most immediately gratifying behaviors,
Which aren't always the best.
even if they're not the most productive in the long run.
Oh, that's so true. Like answering emails instead of working on that big project.
Exactly.
Because you feel like you're accomplishing something.
Right, you get that little dopamine hit.
Yes.
So Ben, he knew he had to break free from that cycle.
So he was like, I'm just going to make it impossible to do anything but focus.
Exactly. No computer, no distractions, just him and the code.
And it paid off.
Oh, big time. He not only graduated from this super tough dev boot camp, but he was the top student in his class.
Wow.
And even more, he landed a developer job in San Francisco making 6 figures.
Okay, so this isn't just some feel-good philosophy. This is like,
It's a skill with real-world value.
exactly, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so if it's so beneficial, why is deep work so rare these days?
It's ironic, right? Our workplaces, even the physical spaces, are often set up in a way that makes deep work almost impossible.
That's so true.
He uses the example of Facebook's headquarters. You know, they brag about having this largest open floor plan in the world.
Right. But I've heard those aren't great for focus.
Exactly. Studies actually show that kind of setup hurts productivity, because it's just so distracting.
Yeah. It's like we're glorifying being busy.
Yeah.
But that busyness is actually stopping us from doing our best work.
It is. And it's not just the office environment. It's this always-on mentality that extends to social media, to email, everything.
Yeah, you're expected to be reachable 24/7.
Like, we're expected to be constantly reachable, responding immediately, even if it means sacrificing the deep work that actually makes us valuable.
Right, because then you never get to that deep work.
Think of journalists, for example, who are pressured to maintain this huge social media presence, even though their real value comes from the deep research, the writing, the in-depth articles that they produce.
It's like the shallow work is getting in the way of the meaningful work. So all this shallow work, it feels productive in the moment, but it's actually holding us back from achieving real focus. This is a tough pill to swallow.
It is.
Is there a way to reframe our thinking about this? Is it just about getting stuff done, or is there something more?
That's where it gets really fascinating. Newport argues that deep work isn't just about productivity, it's about finding meaning in what we do.
Meaning, okay, I like where this is going.
He draws this interesting parallel to traditional craftsmanship. Think about a blacksmith or a woodcarver.
Okay.
They find meaning in the process of their craft, in honing their skills, in creating something beautiful and useful.
So it's not just what you're doing, but how you're approaching it.
Exactly. It's about bringing that same level of craftsmanship to knowledge work.
Yeah.
You need those uninterrupted stretches of time to develop your skills, to think deeply, and to produce something truly remarkable.
That makes sense. But it also sounds really challenging.
It is.
So the big question is, how do we actually do it? How do we cultivate this deep work ethic and find that meaning in what we do?
That's what we're going to explore. Newport actually outlines some very practical strategies for integrating deep work into our lives, even amidst all the distractions.
Okay, so we know deep work is valuable and rare, and it can even help us find meaning in our work.
It's powerful stuff.
But how do we actually make it happen? Like, where do we even begin?
That's the question, right? And thankfully, Newport doesn't just leave us with this vague idea of focus more.
Right.
He gives us concrete frameworks to work with.
Okay, good. I like concrete.
For starters, he outlines 4 different philosophies for scheduling deep work: the monastic, the bimodal, the rhythmic, and the journalistic.
4 philosophies. Okay, so maybe there is hope for us.
There's definitely hope. So the monastic approach, that's all about total isolation. You're basically going off-grid to focus solely on your work. Think of writers or researchers who retreat to cabins in the woods to really immerse themselves in a project.
I get that, but for most of us with jobs and families and lives, that's not exactly realistic.
Right, and that's where the bimodal approach comes in. It's more about finding balance. So you alternate between periods of intense focused work, going full monastic for a set time, and then periods where you're more accessible and engaged in those shallow activities.
So maybe you block off a few days each month to go completely off grid, and then the rest of the time you're more available for meetings and emails.
Exactly. Then there's the rhythmic philosophy, which is all about building a consistent routine. Maybe you dedicate the first 2 hours of every morning to deep work, no matter what.
So it becomes like a habit.
It's like creating a habit, a rhythm for your brain to settle into.
Yeah, I like that. Training your brain.
And then finally, there's the journalistic approach, which is all about flexibility. You squeeze in deep work whenever you can find the time, kind of like a journalist who has to switch gears constantly between writing an in-depth article and then covering a breaking news story.
So finding pockets of focus wherever you can. Okay, so it sounds like the key is to figure out which of these philosophies actually fits your work style and your life best. There's no one-size-fits-all here.
Exactly. It's about finding what works for you. And then once you have a general philosophy in place, there are some additional strategies you can use to really set yourself up for success.
Okay, I like that. So what are we talking about here? Give me some actionable tips.
One thing Newport talks about is the power of rituals. These are specific actions you take to signal to your brain that it's time to transition into deep work mode.
So something as simple as having a dedicated workspace or listening to the same playlist when you need to focus.
Exactly. It could also be a specific time of day that you always dedicate to deep work. The point is to create that mental trigger that helps you shift gears.
Okay, time to get serious now.
Exactly. And sometimes you need to go even further to make what he calls a grand gesture.
Okay, grand gesture. What's that?
This is a more dramatic action designed to overcome resistance and fully commit to deep work. So renting a cabin in the woods for a week to finish writing that book you've been putting off.
Okay, so it's less about the actual gesture and more about the mental shift it creates.
Precisely. It's about drawing a line in the sand and saying, this is important and I'm going to make it happen.
Okay, so we've covered scheduling philosophies, rituals, grand gestures. But what about when we actually sit down to do the work? How do we stay focused and avoid getting sucked back into the shallows?
That's where the art of taming shallow work comes in. And this is really where the rubber meets the road, because it's easy to talk about deep work.
Right. Much harder to actually do it.
But actually putting it into practice, that's a whole other ballgame.
Especially with all the distractions around us.
Yeah.
Even if you block off the time, there's still emails and social media and all these things vying for our attention.
Exactly. And that's why Newport suggests some, honestly, pretty radical strategies for reclaiming our attention and protecting our deep work time.
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with the radical strategies.
One of the most impactful suggestions he makes is to schedule every minute of your workday.
Every minute. That sounds a little intense.
It might sound extreme, but the idea is to take back control of your time by proactively deciding how you'll spend it.
So you're not just letting the day happen to you.
You're not just reacting, you're making a plan and you're sticking to it. You eliminate those moments where you're sitting there thinking, okay, what should I be working on now? Because you've already decided.
Intentional, not reactive.
Precisely. And here's another powerful strategy. Quantify your shallow work.
Okay, quantify my shadow work. What does that even mean?
It means actually tracking how much time you're spending on those low-value tasks. Checking emails, scrolling through social media, attending unnecessary meetings.
Shining a light on all those time wasters.
Exactly. You might be surprised by how much time is being sucked away by these seemingly insignificant activities. And once you see the numbers, you'll be much more motivated to find ways to reduce those shallow commitments.
So awareness is the first step.
Absolutely.
Okay, I like that.
And here's a suggestion that might seem counterintuitive at first. Embrace boredom.
Embrace boredom. But boredom is like the enemy of productivity.
It might seem that way, but our brains have become so accustomed to constant stimulation that we've lost the ability to tolerate even short periods of downtime.
We're addicted to distraction.
In a way, yes. And that's a problem because downtime is actually essential for depth work.
Because if you're constantly going from one thing to the next.
When we're constantly jumping from one distraction to the next, we never give our brains a chance to actually focus on something deeply.
Okay, so it's like we have to rewire our brains.
It takes practice, but it starts with resisting the urge to check your phone or browse the internet whenever you have a free moment. Instead, try just sitting with your thoughts for a few minutes. It might feel uncomfortable at first, but it will train your brain to be more comfortable with a lack of novelty. And ultimately, it will make it easier to focus when you need to.
So it's like building that mental muscle.
Exactly.
The ability to resist distraction and stay focused. But what about all the technology we're surrounded by? Is it even possible to do deep work in a world that's constantly vying for our attention?
That's a great question, and it leads us to another fascinating aspect of the book, Newport's perspective on our relationship with technology.
Okay, so we're talking about taming this digital beast, being more intentional with our tech. What are some of those strategies? You were about to say, like, one of his most controversial suggestions.
He actually suggests quitting social media.
Oh, quitting social media entirely. I feel like a lot of people would have a hard time with that.
It does sound extreme, right? But his point isn't to demonize social media altogether. He simply suggests taking a 30-day break just to reassess its true value in your life.
Oh, so it's more of an experiment.
Exactly. Just step back and see if it's truly serving you, or just sucking up your time and attention.
Right. Like, are you really getting anything out of it, or are you just scrolling mindlessly?
Exactly. You might find that you don't miss it as much as you thought you would, or you might discover that certain platforms are more beneficial than others. It's about being more conscious.
Right. Making sure it aligns with your values and goals.
Absolutely. And that conscious approach extends to other areas of our digital lives as well, like email, for example.
Oh, email. Yes, please. Any tips for taming the email beast?
He introduces this idea of a sender filter.
A sender filter. Okay, what is that?
So it's about setting clear expectations for how people can reach you via email and basically making it more difficult for those who don't respect those boundaries.
Oh, not ignoring email altogether, but just being more selective.
Exactly. Newport himself actually has a sender filter on his website. Anyone who wants to contact him has to agree to a set of rules, including promising to do a good deed for a random stranger if he responds within 24 hours.
Wow, that's next level. But I can see how it would help, not getting bogged down in unnecessary back and forth.
Right.
Are there any other email tips? Because I feel like we could all use a little help in that department.
He has another interesting suggestion. Do more work when you do respond to emails. So instead of just firing off a quick reactive reply, you actually take the time to provide a comprehensive response. You address all the issues raised in the message.
So instead of just saying, let's grab coffee sometime, I would actually propose specific times and locations that work for me.
Exactly. So you're not just passing the buck back to the sender, you're actually moving the conversation forward. And sometimes the most productive thing you can do with an email
is just delete it.
Is simply not respond at all. He actually suggests taking a cue from academics who are notorious for ignoring emails that don't meet certain criteria.
Like what kind of criteria?
Well, for example, if the email is ambiguous, if it's not interesting, or if nothing good would come from responding, then simply don't.
Easier said than done sometimes.
It does take discipline, and that's why he also suggests taking a more structured approach to your workday by implementing what he calls fixed schedule productivity.
Fixed schedule productivity. All right, break that down for me.
It's about setting a firm end time for your workday and then working backward to figure out how to get everything done within that time frame.
So you're not letting work bleed into your evenings and weekends.
Exactly. You're setting a clear boundary. You're forcing yourself to be more efficient with your time.
Yeah, I like that. It's almost like giving yourself a deadline.
It is, which can be a really powerful motivator for focus.
Yeah, I work best under pressure, for sure. But what about when you just hit a wall?
Yeah.
Like you're trying to focus, but you just can't seem to get anything done?
Well, Newport has a counterintuitive suggestion for that too.
Okay, let's hear it.
Take more breaks.
Wait, take more breaks. I thought we were trying to be more productive.
I know, right? It seems counterintuitive, but our brains aren't designed to work for hours on end without a break. Taking regular breaks can actually help you recharge and come back to your work with fresh eyes.
So it's like hitting the reset button.
Exactly.
What kind of breaks are we talking about here?
He suggests activities that allow your mind to wander, to disconnect from work, like going for a walk in nature, listening to music, or even just taking a few minutes to meditate.
Anything to get you out of that headspace.
Exactly. Give your brain a chance to rest and recharge so you can be more focused when you return to your work.
Okay, that makes sense. Any other parting wisdom from Cal Newport?
Well, here's one final idea that really stuck with me. Cultivating what he calls a craftsman mindset.
Okay, we're back to the craftsman. I like it. What does that involve?
It's about approaching your work with a sense of pride and purpose, focusing on developing your skills, and creating work that you can be truly proud of.
So it's like seeing your work as a craft, something you're constantly honing and refining, not just a series of tasks to be checked off a list.
Exactly. And this mindset shift can have a profound impact on your motivation and your satisfaction.
It's about finding joy in the process, not just the outcome.
And that's what deep work is all about. Cultivating a deep and meaningful relationship with your work, one that allows you to create things that matter and to ultimately live a more fulfilling life.
That's beautifully said. So if you're listening and you're feeling overwhelmed by distractions, struggling to focus, remember this. The ability to concentrate deeply is a skill.
It is a skill.
And like any skill, it can be trained.
Absolutely.
So be intentional with your time and attention. Experiment with different strategies, for scheduling deep work. Create rituals and be ruthless about taming those shallow activities.
Those are the keys.
And most importantly, remember, deep work isn't just about productivity. It's about finding meaning and purpose in what you do.
Couldn't agree more.
So the next time you sit down to work, ask yourself, what can I create today that will make me truly proud?